Okay, so we're here today at EiG in Milano. I'm here with Nick Garner from Unibet, head of SEO, and Rasmus Svenningsson, social media strategist at BetSafe. Guys,
Betson Group now.
Betson Group.
Yeah.
Guys, we just finished a session about monitoring social media, and it was very, very interesting. But if we take it all from the beginning, Nick, I know you have a really interesting take on where is this thing really going?
As in social media, where's social media going and what the value of it is and all that sort of stuff. Well, maybe in a few years' time we're going to be able to track social media properly and then put an attribution to it. In other words, we can say that we did this thing on Facebook which caused that particular action somewhere else, which then caused a user to eventually turn up on a website. And because we can track that whole journey, we can put a ROI against any activities that got that person there. But the reality is it's probably not going to happen that way. And one of the reasons is because of the increasing amount of legislation and regulation on the internet. So the European cookie law that's coming through is going to be one example of it. But it's only going to get worse as governments want to clamp down on this kind of stuff, because when they own the internet, they control things, and that's good for them. So I know it's all very conspiratorial, but it makes sense if you think about it. So with social, it's hard to track. And for my own part, when I look at my marketing activity, I've put social in that brand space. So I'm arguing internally that we should definitely get a budget for it, because we really should, but not expect to have the kind of KPIs that we have in other activities against social, simply. But there are other places. There's this idea of zero moment of truth or social proof. So users, when they go out into the internet and they do their thing, and they want to buy something, they'll start from Google going outwards. And they'll start looking at the kind of stuff that helps them make a decision about who they're going to buy from. And we all do this. And Google call this zero moment of truth. So you have brand stimulus, which gives you the shortlist. Shortlist turns into, I'm going to find out more about them. It then gets validated through social proof. Then you go to the cart. Then finally, you then give feedback. And feedback is easier than ever. And the social generation love giving feedback, because on Facebook and other places like that, they're just creating content all the time. And this is just more content about what they think about something. It then gets restructured by Google and made more easily accessible by Google, and the cycle just carries on. And that is the bit of social that I personally really care about.
Rasmus, this is one take on social media from an SEO perspective, and what Nick is saying about social proof is obviously to create a lot of nice content around your brand. What's your take on a social media program going forward?
I mean, like we discussed before on the panel, social media can be so many things, and I think one of the dangers are that people have so many different perceptions on what it is. So for me, it's like you and me have discussed a lot, Joachim, not talking about social as per se, but rather talking about different things you do and doing them in maybe new ways. So you always have to have objectives and goals with what you're doing. If you look at what we've been doing, our goals were to raise our brand awareness. So obviously social is really good for that. We've been launching a lot of campaigns that have been raising our brand awareness for the BetSafe brand a lot, and that we have measured, because you can measure brand awareness and service and stuff. But for us, it's also about not only monitoring external sources, but also building our own communities. And I think in order to do that, you really have to dig in deep and do it for real, rather than just trying to do social because you want to be on the social train. There's no doubt in my mind that businesses will be more and more social over time. But exactly how that is going to unfold, we don't know. I just think it's important to be there and be in the ballpark of social in order to learn and understand. Because once that paradigm actually shifts, you want to be in front. You don't want to start learning when when it's too late. So we're very careful on being on the front line of social within where I work.
Yeah.
I think
Nick.
to add to that,
Yeah.
there's a good analogy here. You remember 10 or 12 years ago, there was this whole idea of mobile internet, which was kind of at that stage a really far off idea, but there was also convergence. And there was all this sort of esoteric talk about how everything would converge in particular ways. And I remember when I did some time working in BBC, and there was a lot of talk about interactive television and so on. And the ideas just seem daft today, but like the way mobile has finally come, the fact that you're using that iPhone, which you will use to access the internet, and as John Palfrey said this morning in his keynote, they expect next year, or Apple expect next year, that more people will access the internet off something like your telephone than desktop PCs. It's crazy. So the point is, when social kind of gets there, it'll all make sense when we see it. We just don't quite see it yet, and therefore it's a mystery, and therefore it's kind of difficult. But you've got to be in it, and you've got to kind of roll along with this journey. And if you're not, if you ignore it, then you ignore it at your peril, because you ignore this new generation that are coming through.
And also take the opportunity that this is not an absolute science yet. You can be part of creating what it's going to become, because we're in it now, and don't just sit around and wait for people telling you what to do.
Yeah.
It's like Nike says, write the future. So you can be part of writing the future.
We talked a little bit before, you and me, Nick, during the lunch, about the problematic of naming it social media. You mentioned, for example, that just as SEO was a bubble a few years ago, social media is now a bubble.
Yeah.
And we took the example of looking at Gartner's hype cycle, where we can see the trends of new tools and technologies having the same path. And we also said that when we look at the IT bubble that burst in the millennium, that actually has the shape of Gartner's hype cycle. Mm-hmm. What's your take on running a social media program, and what's your take on using social media as a definition? But because in reality we could call it anything, really.
Yeah. Okay, so the question is social media a good label? Well, of course it's not. And interestingly, when I think of mobile internet and so on, I think of just mobile. People used to think that was going to be an entirely separate universe to just all the other internet, but actually it's just a continuum. So when I think of social, I think stuff like the emergence of CSS5, for example, and all this kind of mobile technology and all that. I think it's a pretty hopeless term generally, and it covers such a wide spectrum that, yeah, it's a misnomer. I think it just is, right? So social is just stuff we do on the internet, and I would rather talk about things like zero moment of truth or Facebook or Twitter, but I wouldn't like to wrap it all up in social because it's just far too generic. But you know that, which is why you've asked that question.
I'm happy with the answer.
Do I get a question, or are you just videotaping me?
I was thinking if you had a take on it.
Do you have anything to add?
To that, no, I pretty much agree with what you guys are saying. I mean, as you know, I like to break everything down into concrete actions. So whether we call it Project Violet or Project Social Media, we have a set of things we want to do based on the state internet is in today. And if internet is giving us forums where users are, if internet is giving us Facebook, that really, shapes the way we do business, in essence.
It's interesting, forums, if you think about it, or just people socializing and communicating on the internet, has gone right back all the way to, say, the early Usenet groups, which I think was, I think the earliest one recorded was 1978. It's amazing, and forums have been around since forums could exist, which has got to be 93, 92, that kind of thing, or at least bulletin boards were. And I think when you look at Facebook, you go, right, that's huge, it's social, etc. But then you look at sites like 4chan, or is it 4chan? It is 4chan. And other places, for instance, like Betfair's forum, which are huge. So, Betfair's forum is really interesting because for years they decided to just give it a very wide berth because there were so many legal issues related to people saying stupid stuff and so on that they decided just to let the forum community at it. and not get too involved. So they moderated carefully and made sure that people didn't say anything was libelous or bullying or whatever. But because they left it alone, it grew into the biggest forums, the biggest gambling forums on the internet. And there are all these communities which are astonishingly active that have been around for now 15 years or whatever, that to me are in many senses, the biggest driving engine in social. Because it's where people exchange information that's useful to achieve an outcome, and they have a talk. Whereas to me, Facebook is like, what are my friends up to?
But also, you asked what is important to run a program. One thing I think is important is to create the common knowledge, have the same perception on what are we doing. We need to define the term social. If we're going to use the term social internally, we need to know what that means. Otherwise, people are going to start running in different directions. So you maybe need to, because, I mean, we all work in pretty big companies. Mine is perhaps maybe the smallest one of the three, but there's a lot of people that, and every one of them have their own idea on what social is. So my suggestion is launch internal workshops or roundtable discussions or whatever to get that knowledge going, because once people have the same foundation, it's a lot easier to get through with what you want to do.
The way we deal with it in Unibet is really simple. We add an extra word. So you got social acquisition, social CRM, social branding, and that's it. So then we chunk it out into what happens after that, and that works pretty well. I think in the business, the general feeling is that the social CRM stuff, in other words, helping people who have a problem by communicating through these channels like Twitter, Facebook, or whatever, in a more timely and relevant way to them is our number one priority. Because the thing about Unibet is it's a very pro-customer service, pro-playing the game right, inverted commas company. And so that's, of all the bits of social that are going to be, that are important to us, I think that's the number one bit.
And also, talking about customer service, it could be, again, not only external communities, but maybe building your own community with third-party apps and tools like Get Satisfaction or User Voice and stuff like that. You can actually, you being an SEO guy, you can generate SEO content on customer service as well, and get that community healthy by awarding people who help each other, and then you would totally reduce your costs in customer service.
Totally, and it's something we don't talk about in inverted commas, but I see, in very high level terms, I see the stuff that gets knocked out in customer services as being some of the most valuable content we have. The easiest way to look at it is Google support, for example. And Google have a natural aversion to talking to humans as an organization. So what they do is they have this enormous online support infrastructure, which is just fed, it's multi-layered. So you have walkthrough help, you have FAQs, you then have Q&As, or you have like sort of monologue pieces, and then finally you've got threads. And I think if any company can get their customer services stuff out into that kind of infrastructure and get it ranked, it's just such a huge positive thing, a social proof of anything. For new users, and for existing users it just means they don't have to pick up the phone and talk to somebody, and that's huge, and it just calms everyone down, because when someone's angry or they're frightened or something's gone wrong, you know, the money hasn't come out or whatever it is, you know that is a really bad time to mess them around. So we take, you know, Unibet, we take a lot of care of these people, but I think this is just taking it up one more notch. It's really valuable.
My hand is starting to die here, but Rasmus, I would like to ask you one question. I mean, I think you have done fantastic stuff with social media campaigns and activities and all that sort of things with BetSafe, as we saw today. I would like to ask you two questions. One, how did you handle change management internally? And secondly, how did you manage people's perception on such a hype thing as social media?
When you say change management, how do you mean? Can you?
I'm meaning changing the way you do things.
I mean, that's maybe one of the advantages of being in a smaller company like I was at the time. Change was going on all the time. The definition of the company was change. The only thing that didn't change was change itself, like the expression
So
is.
everything you did was basically backed from the CEO and downwards.
Yeah, that is. Our CEO has been very strong on that social is something we should pursue. So I think that is governance is one of the most important things when you try to do something. I mean, you cannot do it unless you have people aboard that have power to decide over things. So that is really important. So once that is said, people know that it's important for the company. It's easier for me to do stuff, and it's also easier for me to do stuff when we're constantly changing. So we hadn't really done that much before. So the things we did it like this for the first time. So in some sense, we didn't have to change that much because it's just the way we did stuff.
Okay, guys, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be on the panel with you both today. Hope there'll be many more terms.
Yeah, and thank you for the good questions, by the way. You see, this is the nice thing about this. You're asking proper questions, which we love. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.